It's Crawl! It's Crawl!
Crawl's the laziest name for a movie.
For an alligator movie.
It makes you want to go to sleep. You're like, Crawl? Crawl, take one. Look, it's like an alligator. Darn, 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 darn.
We went and saw Crawl. Crawl.
Don't run. Crawl away from this film.
Graphics are lazy.
As your resident Florida man in this show, we had to see Crawl.
I did not condone your Floridian roots.
John, why did you drag me to this movie?
Well, yes, you know, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, and I saw his name was all over this. The marketing for the film, though,
Marketing?
Crawl.
Yeah.
That's all you get. Let's just talk. Let me just say, I am a big Sam Raimi fan. I love his Evil Dead movies. They're the reason why I got into movies, why I got into filmmaking, and yeah, he's a really innovative and awesome and creative director. He's definitely made some stuff.
Yeah.
And in his latest
some garbage.
I messed up plenty with the third Spider-Man.
They give you shit for that?
All the time. Yeah.
Why? What do they say?
We hate you.
I feel like he's been more misses, but that does not mean that he doesn't have his fair share of hits.
Or his charm, even in some of his flounders or movies I haven't necessarily liked or loved. Still, I can see some of his charm. I feel like that's something that Sam Raimi always brings.
But we're digressing.
Yeah, he
did not,
produced this.
Yeah, he didn't direct this. He's just a producer, and I think
that alone was enough to get you in the theater.
Well, yeah. I'm a big
So the
fan.
marketing worked.
It did, for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
but
the
he's
first title you
He's
see in the
1/3 of the producing legs of this film.
Yeah.
I can distract them for you.
I guess we should actually get into this movie. We should
talk about the plot.
about the movie. The plot, the plot is it's an alligator movie. It's a fucking alligator movie. You know what alligator movies are. It's a subgenre. You have Lake Placids, you have your crocodile, you have your the Asylum mega gator movies, croctopuses.
Eaten alive.
Yeah, there's, it's...
Hey, ugly. Say goodnight.
People are scared of those things. They make, they make spider movies, they make shark movies, they make these kind of monster flicks.
Yeah.
And this one, it kind of presented itself as it's going to be the kind of Don't Breathe.
You got this!
Or the Shallows kind of version of this, kind of stripped back, is kind of what I thought in the trailer.
It reminded me of The Shallows also, which came out last year.
Yeah, so it's a alligator movie, but this one is predicated on it's mostly played straight. It wants to be a scary movie. And that's where the Sam Raimi influence is just slathered on it.
Well, they're just like, this is an everyday person. She's a young girl who's on a swim team. She's an overachiever. And then all of a sudden she gets a call from her sister being like, hey, there's a hurricane a-blowing in, didn't you know?
It's Florida. It's a Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's like a fucking Category 5. And for some reason, like, everyone was like, hey, we should still have our swim practice tonight. It's not going to hit us.
She had a big race that morning.
Somehow within about 8 hours... The weather changed so drastically without them getting any notice or any communication from the outside world that they just were like, fuck it, let's just apex predators all the way.
Climate change, guys. It's real.
Whatever.
In this movie, at least.
So she gets the call and she's just like, oh my god, oh hey little baby, and saying hi to the baby, and she's all caught up talking to the baby, and they get very casual. They're just having this conversation. She says like, did you hear from Dad? And like it turns out that he's gone missing and no one's been able to get in touch with him, and he may be in the middle of the storm as it's getting worse and worse somewhere along the coastline. And so she goes.
And so right there, this intro of the movie, the first scene of the movie, really. That has set up every single element of this film.
No, that's not the first scene.
Well, this whole little thing of her at the school swimming and all that, going to the locker room, talking to her sister. This whole little intro segment has set up every aspect of the movie. She's a swimmer. She's in college. She and her dad are kind of at odds. They have a strained relationship. She lives in Florida. She goes to the University of Florida, which is
Gainesville.
Yes, Gainesville, which, if anybody knows, is the home of the Gators. And she is she's a world-class swimmer, So pretty much there, and they've set up this storm. So you know that, okay, so it's Florida, there's hurricanes, her dad's in trouble, she's going to go save him, and there's going to be gators.
In the middle, complete, but way short of the first down. Derek Dillon in that Gator defense, and number 33 and number 11.
Well, first you really think I really thought it was just going to be one, but then it turned out to be this whole ordeal.
And that's
we'll talk more about that.
Then they set up like, oh, the dad and the mom are divorced recently.
And they have this property that's in escrow, and he's
Their
trying to get it
childhood
sold.
home.
Yeah. So while this is happening, she realizes, oh, he could be at the old house.
Yeah.
So she drives all the way down, and she gets there, and the place is just like flooding. It's getting worse and worse.
And it's set up that he is a carpenter by trade, so he's at the house trying to fix it up because they're trying to sell it.
Right. So she looks first, she can't find him, and then she discovers that he's somewhere in the crawl space of the house.
Because the dog is barking at the basement.
Yeah. So she goes, she discovers this, and while she's down there, she learns that he's broken his leg.
Instantly, as soon as she goes down there, I have one of my biggest red flags for the movie. If the family just got broken up and this divorce is so fresh and they've all just recently moved out of this family's home, why is this basement fucking covered in shit and bugs and the most like it looks literally like an Evil Dead set.
Yeah.
And it's like, didn't people live here? Like, ever? This guy's a carpenter and his own house is like destroyed. People are gonna buy this.
It's a cesspool.
Yeah, and it's literally, she's like crawling down, and it's just disgusting. She's covered in shit already in the first like 5 minutes.
Down there, yeah.
And
the place hasn't really like flooded or anything.
No,
yet.
it's just
shitty.
Yeah, it's just disgusting.
Yeah.
And then she's like going around.
The rest of the place upstairs is fine.
And already you're having the tense moment of the movie. It's like not even the first 15 minutes. It's because the movie is quick. Everybody, this movie is less than an hour and a half.
But as the story unfolds, we learn that there's this giant gator down there wreaking havoc.
Well, so she's looking around, and the first tense scene of the movie is looking for her dad.
Yeah.
And she finds him, he's knocked out, and so he's like, completely unconscious when we meet him. He's bleeding out and whatever, and she starts trying to drag him away, and that's when you're, already instantly you see the gator, and it is the first true laugh of the movie.
So I think that's where we can just stop like explaining the plot, because once it's set up, you're like, gators, man versus gators. That's the movie.
Gators. Who needs them?
Yeah, but then you're like, oh, but it's all in this house. So then you're immediately like, oh, I understand why Sam Raimi is a producer on this. It's very like a small scale type of set.
Let's do Evil Dead,
but with gators in a cabin in Gainesville.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, but the interesting thing about that is the movie could have just been them in the house with the gator that's in, so you see the one gator, and that's already enough. Like, it's a pretty big gator.
Yeah.
It's like comically large looking. Looks like they had one, they scaled it up. But so it's like, okay, that's enough of a threat. The dad's already sick, already hurt.
Meanwhile, it's a Class 5 hurricane outside.
Yeah, and so like that could be enough for this movie.
That's just
But
gonna
no,
go
so
off any minute.
they're hiding from this gator. You know, so they get away from the first gator attack. Because the dad's unconscious, he can't tell her what's happening. It's a
Right.
great setup, and it startles her and it startles us, and we're caught off guard. You know, it's a lot of jump scares, and she has to run back, and then as she's pulling it away, you know, it's revealed that there's a second gator.
That's it. That's the big turn. There's just more.
Yeah, and that's what opens that floodgate and that thing, and you realize, oh, this movie's just gonna throw gators at you like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
You're just gonna have infinite gator. You know, you turn a corner, like, boom, gator.
Yeah. So it gets out of hand. Like,
Yeah.
there's a scene where they tear a guy into five or six pieces. So it starts to definitely escalate, but the premise never really stretches too far in terms of the drama or the circumstances, the situations. They don't seem to drive any further past the fact that the water is rising constantly and that there are gators. And so that should be enough. You know, you would think
Yeah.
that should be enough. But unfortunately, like, the bigger problem with this film is that the performances are so shit. Like, I think that's the one thing that really kills it.
Yeah,
and I'm really
the
unimpressed.
performances in this I would call placid.
Right?
Yeah,
That's why I miss.
looks more like Dead by Dawn.
No?
Yeah,
I tried. I tried.
But yeah, exactly. Like the movie, it feels like it wants to have its cake and eat its two to steal.
Eat its dude?
Eat a lot of two. But so like it wants to be that kind of like grounded, small, like this is in a basement, you know, two people versus the skater kind of movie. But then it also wants to be the ridiculous kind of big, extravagant, like horror monster movie. It kind of wants to be eight-legged. It's like it's Sam Raimi.
Eight-legged freaks. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny you bring that up. Yeah, I guess I kind of see that.
It's
But
like
I would say it doesn't have the same kind of like camp.
Tongue-in-cheek.
It doesn't have the
element.
same
It
kind of
doesn't-
camp value.
Yeah.
Where like because the thing is the film carries a very serious tone where you're supposed to really feel a lot of emotion behind the central character who's like really hard on herself, really trying to be the best all the time, despite sort of having these reservations about what's driving her, whether she's doing it to impress herself, whether she's doing it to impress her dad.
Or just because
her parents' divorce, she feels somewhat responsible for because her dad was dedicating a lot of time to her, she later reveals. And unfortunately, like, there just isn't that kind of tension upon the first arrival when we see them together. Like, you don't feel that tension, you don't feel those problems, and it is just, like, everyone seems very misinformed and under...
And wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Their motivation, like...
She doesn't seem also very terrorized, like...
She's not...
She's just not charismatic.
Yeah,
and it kills it.
Barry Pepper's not that great either. Really, none of the performances
what was the
are great.
lead's name? Sayasa? Kaya, yes.
Her character's name is Haley. I don't know.
Kaya Scutolario. How you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Whatever.
I've never seen her in anything.
Haley was, she
and
was.
the sister was a non-character. They never bring her up again. Besides just that she calls a lot. Yeah. It's
There's
so
just
stupid.
not. I think at the end of the day, besides the fact that I feel like the story doesn't really have a lot of depth, I just think it comes down to the performances. I think they could have sold it and helped drive things a little better. But then also, the worst part of this film has to be the effects. Because sometimes they're good.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they're good, they're great. But when they're bad, it's really, really bad.
To be fair, though, I looked up how much this movie cost to make. And I was surprised. How much do you want to guess? Do you want to take a guess how much this cost?
It was maybe like... They had to fucking submerge a whole house. I would say like somewhere in the range of like 40 million? No?
13 and a half.
13 and a half.
Supposedly that was the budget. Yeah.
Wow.
That was actually, finding that out put the movie in perspective for me. I had thought that this was like a mid-budget $30-40 million picture.
Wow.
But I mean, despite the fact that the effects look kind of laughable sometimes.
I think the first appearance of the gators is cartoonish.
The biggest miss.
It looks almost something like out of like Spawn, like just really
or
funny.
I thought like, you know, like one of those like sci-fi, like Asylum.
Yeah, no,
like
it was scraping.
It's not that.
It was
it's
scraping
not that bad, but like
when we have to get a close up of the thing's claw, forget it.
Yeah,
and I don't care that they're wet, you know, because like even that has texture and shape to it. It's not just like glossy now because it's wet, okay? That looks like shit out of like a Resident Evil from the late 90s, early 2000s.
there was some bad lighting and texturing on things.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think there were times in the film where the effects were really effective, especially when they're in water, when they're swimming around. That stuff looks very active and fluid in some ways. There are some times where they look a little jerky. Times where I see the tail whipping and I'm like, why doesn't it whip? Why, like, first of all, I think they got a lot of the gator movements down, but there are some things also that they held back on to get the choreography right later when they actually rendered the CG.
Yeah, I mean, with the gators in general, I would say the gators, they like half make sense and half don't. Like half the time they're like the mindless beasts that they are and they just kind of do their thing. But then other times they're like a video game obstacle and like our characters like cross a line of like sight or activation for them and they just like get triggered and they just go.
Yeah.
You'll see like their eyes almost light up because of this like night vision thing they want to implement.
It's so lame.
And they'll just activate and they'll go after and it's just... At a certain point, it became laugh out loud comedy to me.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad when the main like horror foil to you becomes, you know, a joke.
Yeah. The main character also makes some very poor decisions. There's a time where she's very desperate and she tries to go and get her phone so she can dial 911. And it's just out of sight of one of the gators, which is like, you know, down at the other end of the crawl space. This is early on in the film. And when she goes for it, she sees that when she grabs it, she yields back and she looks around the corner and we see like that she's just behind the corner of what is the blind spot of this gator. But if that gator comes forward just about a foot, he's gonna see her. So
even though they set up that there are safe spots and that they can go,
she just took this totally safe route to get there too. So she just instead sits in the blind spot and dials 911 and sits there and waits for it to go
tries
through.
to take this call, and then
the
gator attacks, and then blah blah blah.
It's just like,
and the phone gets crushed.
Later, towards the end of the film, spoilers, they're headed for the roof, and
yes,
just as they're headed,
it floods so much that they have to go to the roof.
Yeah, so it gets to the point where they're so desperate, they've been shoved back into the house that the flooding is getting out of control, and it's starting to chase them up the stairs, and so they get up, and there's like one more floor, there's a bedroom up there, and then they pull down the stairs to get up into the attic, and just before they go up into the attic, she looks through the window through the bedroom, and the water must be like 5.5 feet, 6 feet high
on the second
up
story
through
of
the
this
second
house.
story of the house, and she looks through the window, she sees a helicopter up in the distance, and she's like, oh, I see a helicopter, and she pulls out a flare, and she's like, hey, we're over here, but she's in this bedroom.
And they're right there. They just pulled down the attic stairs. They're going up.
They're going to go up and hit the roof.
The dad with the broken leg and no arm is going up the fucking stairs, and she's just like, helicopter, and then...
And so she books it right towards the window, and what happens? Alligator.
Fucking alligator just bursts through.
Just deep blue sees it right through.
Because you just need one more bit of conflict, because there's the last 5 minutes of the movie. She couldn't just go up on the attic.
It was so stupid.
It's pretty... I always hate when the script becomes visible in a movie.
Yeah.
When like the creative team becomes a part of the movie, when it's just like, well, what will the characters do now? Just put a gator in there.
Yeah, just another gator.
There was when they're up on the roof and it's like the end of the movie, and they're like things are wrapping up. The Barry Pepper just points up at the sky, and both of us start laughing, and we just because we both thought that a gator was just going to be coming from the sky.
Well, but it's at that climactic moment where
Yeah.
they climb up to the roof. She had to just like whack past a gator on like the
gutters.
on the gutters of the roof, and so she climbs up, and then he like reaches out her hand, he grabs her, he hoists her up
just
onto
like
the roof.
they've reinforced the whole movie about the swim team thing.
Yeah.
because he was her coach.
So we get that match cut of her lifting her up out of the
Yeah.
water as a kid,
Like
and then
Captain
back
Marvel-esque.
yeah, totally. But he lifts her up, and then she's there. She's out of breath. She looks at him. So he's looking up into the sky, and we thought it's gonna be a fucking gator flying through the fucking sky. It's like ah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, this movie gave me really strong Sharknado vibes. I know I mentioned Asylum earlier, but like, I don't know if you're familiar with those movies. But,
I am.
But the plot of one of them, I think it's the first one, the most toned down of them, I guess. One of the plot lines is that like one of the characters goes back to their house that's flooding to try and save one of their loved ones, and the house is flooding, and Sharknadoes keep like coming and destroying the windows, and they're like in there, and it's like this whole movie is essentially the one of the storylines in an Asylum sci-fi movie, made for TV movie. It's
Which is taken very, very seriously.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I do think that technically it's done pretty well, but
it's got its merits. For a low-budget feature, this really does it well. It's all very well executed in its production design.
I think this one weekend, it's already made its money back. I think it will.
Beyond a doubt. I think even though the marketing campaign on this was a little light, I still think the premise is strong enough to get people's attention.
How do you market a movie called fucking Crawl?
I mean, they could have done better with the title. I don't know what that's about. Like Swim or
call it
something.
Gator in a Basement. I'll go see Gator in a Basement.
It's just snakes on a plane.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
You think I won't fucking pay to see gators in a basement? Gators in a basement. Yeah, look, it even looks better on the screen.
Also, Samuel L. Jackson is in it. He comes in at the end. It's a
fucking
cinematic
gators in this
universe. Boom! Look,
motherfucking
you know how the
basement.
Conjuring universe exists. This is the Animals on Things universe.
I'm gonna say I don't think this movie, unfortunately, is worth it. I think it was really it left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
They didn't stretch the premise the right way. They kind of sold off way too much too soon. And I felt like they should have really characterized the beasts a little bit more, given them a little more charisma, a little more personality, a little more depth. Because that's what I really like about monster movies. And I felt like that was really lacking. And there was that moment where they planted, and I thought it was going to be a big setup. She, like, at one point, jabs out one of the big guy's eyes in the basement. And
with her father's tools, because he's a carpenter.
So then it comes off as kind of personal.
Yeah.
And then the thing comes back looking at her, it's just like... And you're like, oh, that's a big one. He's going to come back for her, you know? And then, of course, it never comes back. It doesn't mean anything. And I'm left with it's just another gator. And it's just a lot of gators. And gators, you know, gators are scary. But
but they're also not that scary.
They're more...
There's a crocodile fucking hunter.
Yeah.
Like...
Exactly.
Then, like,
I mean, I like the idea of a monster really being one that's just smarter. Just a little smarter.
Even with character, I'd be fine, because our human characters are pretty fucking dumb. Yeah. So I can understand our dumbass monster getting the one up on them. The movie sets up rules, which I really like. In horror movies... is a genre that needs rules, I think. And this one, it sets up. The movie starts off pretty strong in these ways because it sets up the layout, the location very well. The basement, the pathways and the safe spots of the basement are pretty nicely laid out for you and very nicely visually told. The dad being, you know, unconscious when you meet him, so you don't get to know that the gator is happening. the radio in the background and like the flooding and things. Just like there are nice setups there.
There's
and
a continuity in things that you're keeping track of as it goes.
In a
and
way that the story elements are kind of being told to you are nice, and like the rules of gators can't hear when they're above water, and they have good night vision, and that they're faster in the water.
And their eyes also glow.
For some reason. But I thought that was going to be a setup of, so they can see the gators in the dark because their eyes glow, but I thought that maybe she would carve out this one's eye, or eyes, and it wouldn't see, and then, but it could still hear under the water, and you would hear that
would have been so much cooler.
Like Sam Raimi vision, which they do a few times in this movie.
Yeah.
The whole Evil Dead perspective.
Underwater.
But they do it with that, and they
doesn't
hear...
amount to much.
It doesn't.
Because sometimes they use it and it's not POV. It's just
really
an
not,
insert,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, it's an insert.
It's really, it's confusing.
Because
like
you're left,
Jaws,
you're like, because it's moving around, you're like, oh, he's right fucking under, and you're like, oh no,
it's just
an insert.
Yeah, it means nothing. It's
just her
confusing.
legs.
But like it sets these things up, and like you could hear like the bassy tone, and just being like, oh, the thing can hear you, but then it gets up and it can't.
Yeah.
It could set you up for that, and also it's too in the middle between a nice decision between being this kind of like out there, kind of like bigger, kind of crazier, funny alligator movie where there's 50 gators in this swamp and they're all huge and there's babies and there's a little dog. And
there is a little baby gator that shows up when she
like
finds
a second.
the egg.
I'm
It's
literally
like,
cute.
It
Felt like a Godzilla 1998 moment.
I thought it was gonna go that way.
Yeah, I literally was hoping that the dog is like paddling, and then you just behind it you just see a bunch of little gators.
Sugar, and then you start all like nibbling at him until there's nothing left.
I feel like we should probably we've talked too long. I
Well,
think.
that's enough.
That's how we always do.
Is,
but we should do our final.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
recommendation.
Let's wrap it up.
Stray thoughts too. I do want to say that Barry Pepper looked like the guy from Jackass that glued pubes to his face.
Yeah.
And they even bring up his beard at one point in the movie, and I was just like, why is everyone aware that this beard looks like pubes, but they let him have it?
Yeah,
it's so bad.
He's got it for his dating website profile.
It's so bad.
It's so puby and gross.
Yeah. But other than that, I wish that this movie was either more grounded or more ridiculous.
I just wish it was more creative.
Yeah, I wish.
And I wish the performances were stronger.
Or that it followed the rules a bit more.
I think it sets up some pretty strong rules, but I think also the thing that upsets me the most is I don't really care too much about the main characters.
I kind of wish more people got eaten by gators.
I wish the gators had more personality. I think it's bad performances, not enough creativity, not stretching the premise for its worth. But you couldn't even get the personality out of just one, even though you stabbed its fucking eye out.
You couldn't get a personality out of a person.
No.
So it's
and
like,
whenever she
whatever.
got scared or wherever she was short of breath because she was panicking, she was like,
hey, she has good control of her breathing. Okay?
Dad!
She's a swimmer.
Dad! And it's just like, she should be fucking shrieking at the top of her lungs. She should be terrorized. I mean, real.
This is a pass for me unless you're really hankering for some
I'm just saying,
animal action.
I'm just saying that this is a missed opportunity. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10 because it hits a lot of marks for me, but then it just as much on the... It's balanced with all these problems. Yeah, pros and cons.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it takes a lot, Sam Raimi, to disappoint me, I mean, I just felt like there were some things...
Yeah, you watched seasons of Ash vs. Evil Dead.
I did.
You couldn't make it through 88 minutes.
No, I did. I made it through,
Yeah, I was
It had
the
its
clock.
moments. It has its merits. But I don't feel like it's strong enough on its own, and I felt like it needed at least another round of reshoots. Something to really strengthen it and pull it together.
There was a possibility for a good movie in this. But
the premise and everything, the setup is strong enough, but the characters... And also the lack of personality in the monsters, not enough for me. Not interesting enough.
Yeah, stick with Sharknado on this one.
I have to agree with Sharknado.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's us. That's it from us.
That's it.
Have a good one.
Go bye.